Hello everybody, this is the M-Crew Dude. Out of all of the anniversaries to celebrate this year, I wanted to look back on something a little bit more pathetic and infamous. A game that is so terrible that it fails to get even a single thing right. Some may even go on to say that it's the worst video game ever made, which is highly debatable. Of course, I am talking about Ride to Hell Retribution. This game was developed by Eutechnyx and published by Deep Silver on June 24th, 2013. It was released and later removed from Steam, and is still available for PS3 and Xbox 360. Originally announced in 2008 as an open-world game, it was quickly cancelled and stuck in development hell for about 5 years, until it was revealed again. The open-world concept was dropped, in favor of a linear story format broken up by vehicle and combat segments. The game takes place during the 1960s, with a fun theme to match the setting, as it tries to be like a classic action film, but that is where any and all praise ends. When the game was finally released, it was panned by audiences and critics, citing every possible element of the game from its dated graphics, bad game design, poor gameplay, awful story writing, and amateurish voice acting. I mean, just look at it! This looks like an Xbox original game. Shortly before the game released, Deep Silver even planned for this game to be a small series, with a downloadable title called Ride to Hell Route 666, and a mobile game called Ride to Hell Beatdown. Needless to say, these got canned really quickly and never saw the light of day. We all know this game is a used needle dumpster fire, but just how bad is it? Well, if you're going through hell, you need to push through before the devil sees you, so let's do this. The game opens on a really poor note when we watch a brief cutscene before being thrown into a Gatling gun section without warning or context. It just appears on screen and we are given control like the game expects us to know what to do. We are then forced to beat up this one guy with simple QuickTime events, and we see just how ugly the protagonist looks. His tattoos are illegible due to the poor quality of the graphics, and he tries to keep a pack of cigarettes on his sleeve, which was a common look for the 60s. The problem is, he can't even do that right. You're supposed to pull the sleeve over the box of cigarettes, because how is he going to hold on to it like that without it falling out? Let this scene set the stage for the literal ride to hell we're in for. The real story begins as a man named Jake Conway returns home from the Vietnam War. I just have to say, this is probably the most laid-back army base ever since they allowed him to keep such a stupid-looking mullet. He reunites with his fellow mullet-owning Uncle Mac and mullet-owning brother Mikey. After Jake takes a moment to rest, the scene suddenly changes, and now the two of them are watching a movie. So much for character development, I guess.
Swear to God, I'd rather be polishing boots than sit through this crap.
That should have been the review quote on the box. So Mikey wants to go out to see a local band, to which Mac refuses, stating that there have been multiple murders in the area recently. Mikey gets a little upset and runs off anyway.
Oh, shit! Jake, take my bike from out back and find him. It ain't safe out there. Get out of here, goddammit.
Yeah, nice delivery on that line. After a short chase, we catch up with him and have to struggle to listen to the dialogue.
Hey, Mikey! Wait up!
Get lost! Why didn't you stick up for
Jesus, Mikey. I've been gone, okay? I don't know what the hell's going on between you and Mac.
You're different, Jake! What? Can you speak up? I can't hear you over the crappy motorcycle noise! So Jake manages to calm Mikey down, and then he heads off to a diner to get him some food. Mikey then gets accosted by a group of bikers with some of the worst voice acting ever.
This is like a skinny little old baby cow, ain't it? You ever slice an ear off of a baby cow? They scream and scream. It's funny.
You've probably guessed by now that the game is filled with awful voice work throughout. I can imagine that the developers wanted lesser-known talent, but did they really just find random people on the street? I've heard English dubs of foreign films that sound better than this.
Mikey, I got your burger. Let's go.
What? No, you clearly don't. So one of the bikers sees the back of Mikey's vest and they all give chase. Jake explains to Mikey that the bikers are from a rival gang called the Devil's Hand, and they were apparently enemies of their late father. We then get some timed bike combat, which I say loosely. What happens is that an enemy pulls up next to you and locks you in place. You mash a button to hit them a few times as blood explodes out of them before they fall off and their bike sails off for a mile. Even if you mess up the button prompt, the enemy just gives you a love tap and explodes anyway. The driving mechanics in this game are horrendous, and you'd think that a game focused on bikers would prioritize that, but everything feels very slippery, like you're riding over a sheet of ice. Whenever you hit something on the road like an oncoming car, the screen goes black and you get reset a short ways back. This might have been logical to the developers, but it's really a big inconvenience. It would be less trouble to back up and move around what I hit, rather than being forced back and having to make up for lost time. The hit detection in this game is really inconsistent, which makes the problem even worse. There are times when you'll need to power slide under some obstacles, but even when you make it, if you slightly touch something, you still get reset. If this happens too many times, you drive off and explode. Health regenerates, so at least that's one thing you won't have to worry too much about. Anyways, Jake and Mikey get caught by the gang, as Mikey is held at knife point while the bikers demand to know where the jacket came from. What, did the Foley artist fall asleep? In fact, most of the cutscenes are eerily quiet, which only makes them more uncanny.
He's just a kid.
It seems like we're reaching an understanding here. Let me put it plain. Retribution should be dead and buried. You don't tell me where you got this jacket. The same thing will happen to this child.
What? Then why are they doing this if not for revenge?
It's our dads, okay? It's our fucking dads!
And who might your father be?
William Conway.
Toledo Conway?
The patch over the breast pocket says Toledo! How did they not see that? So Mikey is killed, while Jake is shot and left for dead. Despite taking a buckshot to the stomach, Jake quickly recovers without any explanation and swears revenge on the entire gang. The next day, Mac informs Jake that their first target is a man named Anvil, who was the bald guy with the handlebar mustache. By the way, you might have already noticed this, but every cutscene starts before all the textures are loaded in, so everything ends up looking like a blurry blob for a few seconds. This got cleared for release, mind you. So Jake arrives at this airplane cemetery, and he decides to pick a fight with a bunch of workers in exchange for information.
Who the fuck are you?
A man looking for Anvil, but all I see is this ugly chick with a ponytail.
He doesn't even have one! What the hell is this? So the guy who doesn't have a ponytail tells Jake that Anvil went off to see a dealer named Carlos. Luckily, we don't have to drive there, as we immediately cut to a place that looks like a discount version of Reno.
You Carlos? I'm interested in an exchange of goods.
Right on, man. Right on. Lay it on me. Hey, hold up, boss. I know my weed from my weed, and this shit looks like Anvil stuff. You know?
As it so happens, I need to find Anvil. I'm looking for him. Ideas?
Last time I seen the big guy, he was going to the motel for some action. It's across the street, behind the bar.
Thanks, man. See you around.
Oh, Suki. Oh, wow.
Yeah, when you were told to improvise, that's not what they meant. So Jake takes a few steps across the street to a motel, and this is where we find one of the game's collectibles, which I say extremely loosely. At certain points, you'll find women who are being harassed by entitled men, and Jake steps in to beat them up, where he is then rewarded with sex. We then bear witness to some of the most awkward sex scenes in history, where both characters are fully clothed and get it on with dead-faced expressions. Reminds me of that ridiculous dry humping scene in Bad Teacher.
Your jeans feel so good against my jeans.
Totally.
After that, Jake is dropped back into the world like nothing ever happened. This is absolutely disgusting, because who in their right mind would throw themselves at their rescuer after they were almost assaulted? It's just scummy, like what a maladjusted 13-year-old boy would think masculinity is. So Jake walks around the motel as Anvil runs off, forcing Jake to run half a block to get back to his bike. Why didn't he think to destroy Anvil's bike when it was parked at the entrance? I'll never know. So Anvil gets away and barricades himself in the brewery. Despite the urgency of the situation, Jake walks up to a woman who explains that her husband is the foreman of the place and has the keys as well as her mother's wedding ring. So Jake drives about 5 miles away, beats up the guy, we get another awful sex scene, and then we have time to go through a lengthy gun tutorial. Meanwhile, Anvil is just chilling at the brewery, picking his nose while Jake is trying to kill him. So Jake meets a big bearded soldier named Tyrell, who shows him how to use a gun right after Jake nearly murders 2 of his soldier buddies in order to prove his worth, I guess. The gun mechanics are very standard, but nothing special. You have your basic pistols, rifles, and shotguns, as well as a missile launcher later on. You can buy new weapons and loadouts from Tyrell's army truck, which is helpful, and the ways that you acquire money in this game are by collecting it from dead bikers, or by selling drugs that you also pick up from fallen enemies. There's a dealer that you can sell them to, but for some reason, there are multiple different kinds of narcotics, even though they all look identical when you find them in-game. Anyways, we go back to the brewery and go through a shootout that lasts way too long, and we eventually take down Anvil with this beautiful meme.
Jake? What the hell happened?
In between story missions, you can return to the town of Dead End, which serves as a hub world. Here you can sell your drugs, buy weapons, and walk around. There are some other random people here, but you can't kill them, unfortunately. It's very clear that this game was supposed to be sandbox just by looking at the town, and it only makes me wish we had that game instead. The town itself is poorly structured, as if the player was intended to come and go as they pleased, but whenever you try to walk outside the map, you just get pushed back in. You can also go inside Mac's garage and customize your bike. I'll admit, it would be a cool feature if it actually meant something like in Days Gone. Nothing will improve your bike by much, and no matter what I do, it always looks like an ugly mess. The parts all look similar to each other, and the colors you have are mostly too bright and off-putting. You can unlock additional paints, but it hardly matters since you probably won't ever use them. In addition to the customizable bikes, you can also select between 4 other bikes to use. Not sure why you would want to, since the customizable one will always have a personal touch. The others are the Lost Soul, where you can imagine Jake boning a mangled skeleton. The Clutch, which has this weird thing on the front like it was knocked up by an airplane. Also, it's supposed to say Lady Luck on this tail fin, but some idiot misspelled it as Lady Loose on the right side, yet somehow managed to spell it correctly on the left. The Copper Tongue, which isn't even made of copper but very rusty metal because someone thinks that's what copper is. And finally, there's Army with its puke green camo paint. After you take care of that, you can go to the corkboard nearby and select your next mission, which is some guy named Meathook, who has an inconsistent Irish accent. This guy runs an underground boxing ring, and you are forced to fight 3 opponents before reaching him.
Let's give it up for Bullseye!
So this guy is an easy beginner. He has the strength for what he lacks in speed. So what you'll want to do is press square to kick him into the turnbuckle and tap square repeatedly until he stops moving. Combat in this game is very standard. It's just okay. You have your punches, blocks, kicks, and counterattacks, which are all contextual. But what's funny is that you can just keep kicking your enemies and they'll never fight back. It's slow, but you'll eventually kill them.
In at number 3, we have a cold-blooded killer. A man who spends 12 hours a day in a pit digging using only his bare hands. It's on the bell, gentlemen.
So this guy with a laughable name is a bit tougher. He deals a lot more damage and reacts to your every move. So press square to kick him into the turnbuckle and kick him non-stop.
A fighter infamous across 5 states, and a felon in every one of them. Please welcome Selvin the Destroyer!
This guy is one tough son of a bitch. He has an insane amount of health and will block almost anything you throw at him. It'll take some time to bring him down, so press square to kick him into the turnbuckle and get him well acquainted with the underside of your boot. Finally, we get to fight Meathook, and he does have a few stages in his boss fight. He even gets a spiked bat, violating the no weapons rule, and cuts his hand with it just to show how badass he is. You'll need to change your strategy a bit with this guy. Block whenever he comes in at you, and counterattack with a punch whenever possible. And then press square to kick him into the turnbuckle. Once he's down, Jake tries to get information from him until some guy shows up and stabs him in the back. How did he even do that? He stabbed straight through a wooden pole and all the way through his chest. Next is some guy named Colt, and he's hiding out in his own weed farm, which is protected by an electric fence. Jake comes up with a straightforward plan to get inside by stealing a fuel truck across the street, beating up the drivers, taking it to the power station with the police in hot pursuit, murdering a bunch of innocent workers trying to stop him, and then he blows up the truck as he jumps into the water. And who says there's no such thing as a surefire plan? Once inside, Jake confronts Colt and mindlessly shoots a gas tank, which sets the whole weed farm on fire. He then goes to an airplane graveyard, where he takes down Colt right after killing a few thugs with hockey masks. For some reason, having a hockey mask on makes you resistant to bullets. Greasy Steve is the next target, and the one who killed Meathook earlier.
Been waiting for you, boy.
Oh, yeah?
I saw you fighting Blackfeet. Yeah, but, you know, I noticed you kinda cheated, didn't you?
I wouldn't call exploiting crappy controls cheating. So Greasy Steve manages to get away, so Jake returns to the gas station. Damn! Oh, sorry. So this girl agrees to help Jake, and brings him back to this large mansion where Jake kills all the abusive men inside. Despite the pile of corpses on the first floor, Jake and the girls engage in the most laughably awkward orgy ever. After watching that Brazzers Reject sex tape, Jake learns that Steve is entering a big race, so he eventually finds his way to a racetrack and we have to put all these broken mechanics to the test. Actually, it's not so much a race, we just need to outrun this one guy. He then blows up, and then his dick falls in front of the screen. Yeah, I know, it's just a finger. In the next few missions, we go after a guy named 666, who has a personality just as weak as his sideburns. Some of the other bikers include some dude named Pretty Boy, and another guy named King Dick.
Are you telling me that I don't know Dick? If anyone knows how to build a ship out of dicks, it is me!
Yes, Mr. Wallburger!
Because I am King Dick!
They're really nothing special, and we just go through the same tedious crap. I have to admit, some of these locations are surprisingly nicely detailed, and it only makes me wish that this game was a sandbox. We get to travel to the strip club with decent lighting effects and interior decoration, but we only get to see it a few times in the cutscenes. After that, we return to Not Reno and enter this huge casino with a lot of elaborate detail that I'm sure the developers put effort into, but we're only there for a second before we beat up some thugs and leave. What's odd is that you can actually go back inside later, but the entire space is now empty. I thought that this was done to save space and I just accessed a glitch, but no, they put a collectible card inside, so they intended for the player to go back. I forgot to talk about the cards. They're just these things that you can find in the game, and most of the time they're impossible to see until you get notified that you found them. All they really do is unlock new bike parts and paint jobs. Once the other bikers are dead, Mac reveals that he knew about a kill order on Toledo and his kin, but promised not to tell Jake and Mikey. Why, though? I can understand wanting to raise them in a way so they wouldn't grow up in fear, but why stay in Dead End if they have a risk of being discovered? That's exactly what ended up happening. Mac explains that Toledo and his former associate Caesar raced to win the affection of a woman who ended up becoming Jake's mother, but then Toledo tried to gamble her away some years later or something, but it hardly mattered since they both died anyway. With this revelation, Jake returns to Dead End and meets a girl named Ellie who was a good friend of Mikey's and probably the only woman who doesn't get sexualized. Suddenly, oh no! The bikers break into the garage where they kidnap Ellie and kill Mac, leading to this really funny reaction from Jake.
No! No! No!
He then goes off to some rundown stadium and saves Ellie, where it's revealed that she is Caesar's daughter. She explains to a shocked Jake that she ran away from Caesar, who was an abusive father, and found Mikey and Mac to be the family she never had, and goes all melodramatic. There are points in the story that attempt to delve into the character's thoughts and past experiences, but they are never explored, and there is no character development whatsoever. Who needs internal conflict when we have simple revenge plots and awkward sex scenes that serve no purpose? Finally, we reach the big boss, Caesar, who is the last of the Devil's Hand, and he tells us what we already know. Apparently he had some disagreements with Toledo, which is why they hated each other. Nothing to script, just that Caesar wanted to control things in a violent manner, and Toledo wanted to be drunk and lazy, I guess. I don't really know. He even does the whole, "you and I are cut from the same cloth" cliché, which holds no weight given the circumstances. So after we fight our way through a bunch of enemies, we chase him on our motorcycle and Jake hops onto Caesar's handlebars, where he gouges his eyes out before he falls off a cliff and explodes. This crappy game finally comes to an end as Jake carries Ellie off into the sunset, and we sit through the end credits, which is just white text scrolling up a black background without any music. Now, believe it or not, this game actually has DLC. There's another mission you can download called Cook's Mad Recipe that adds some new locations and some interesting new weapons such as screwdrivers, spiked bats, and guitar necks. This mission involves a madman named Cook who is planning a terrorist attack involving a small atom bomb, so Jake and Tyrell have to work together to stop him. You go to a few added locations, such as Old Moon Ranch, which I first assumed was a brothel because my mind went in the gutter, and an oil refinery which has some cool weather effects. We also get to see the same boring places too, where we have to confront Cook himself. He tries to run away, and you aren't allowed to shoot him, so you're forced to aim your gun at him to intimidate him. How would that work? He's running away from you with his back turned, and you have to take aim to scare him? We eventually find Cook again, and fight him in a timed boss fight where Jake gives him the business with the underside of his boot. Cook arms the bomb, and rather than getting the hell out of Dodge, the bomb squad arrives and safely detonates it right after Tyrell tied Cook to it like a sociopath. And that was finally the end of Ride to Hell Retribution, and wow, it was awful all the way through. This is a unique kind of abysmal that is sometimes laughably good and sometimes really annoying and tiresome. Everything that could go wrong somehow finds a way to suck zebra balls. The bike riding, the voice acting, the story writing, the sexist depictions, and the graphics are all handled in the worst way possible. I have no idea how the hell this game was made this terribly by accident, unless the developers routinely got into arguments and hit each other over the head with clubs. If I was to be charitable and say something positive, I'd say that the gunplay, while sloppy, does function. Headshots are always satisfying, but it's mostly because I don't want to fight them head to head. The melee is broken, but it isn't the worst I've played. I might have said that Unearthed has the worst fighting, but now I can confidently say that dishonor goes to the Quiet Man. Every humorous moment in this game was unintentionally funny, as I usually laughed at how ridiculous the weak voice delivery is, as well as the predictability of the plot twists. If not for some occasional glitches and bad game design choices, I'd say that this is the equivalent of The Room for video games. If you can watch some footage on YouTube, go for it. It's better than playing the game, and it's something that I think deserves to be seen just because it's a spectacle of hot garbage. Simply put, this game never should have been made. It is failure incarnate. I'd be less disappointed if the game failed to load from the start. The 1% on the cover is its rating. If someone gave me this game as a gift, I'd call them a dick and mock them on the internet. Okay, maybe that was a bit too harsh. I actually used to have a coworker who gave this game to me as a present. I mean, I asked for it, so it was fine. But the thing is, like the game itself, he went on to steal money from people, so screw him. This is the M Crew Dude signing off, wishing you all a very pleasant day.